call that Richard Spencer published on his Radix journal, he makes the case for pursuing the sinister path, the immoral path, and the dishonest path. I mean, he's trying to seize the mantle of the hardest man in history. Listen to this discussion. It's incredible.
Arousing of suspicion if you've got to hide behind, Turkey Fucker 3000 on a internet forum instead of just letting everybody see who you are. And probably something for our movement, although I understand and fully appreciate how difficult it is. But when it's just some weirdo who hides behind some obviously fake name, then it's inherently to the person that, I know we're not trying to, quote unquote, get everyone on our side, but we don't want people to look at us and go, oh, they're a fucking weirdo because they're using this, avatar, and, we just arouse a suspicion inherently. Whereas if you go forthrightly, my name is such and such, this, these are sincerely held beliefs, and I do believe ultimately these are moral beliefs, and, anyone that's even in good faith marketing is going to go, well, I still think that's wrong, but I don't see you as, the virgin incel weirdo on 4chan.
Okay, but I'm going to call you out here a little bit.
Go ahead.
Keep in mind that in many ways, our beliefs are immoral and wicked.
Right. He is embracing being immoral and wicked. What normal person, particularly with a family and some kind of position in life, wants to embrace a movement that its leader says is essentially immoral, wicked, and sinister? Like, Richard Spencer is explicitly, publicly advocating for taking the sinister and dishonest path.
I mean, I think this is something we actually have. You have to embrace that, because I think there's there's something else that we've done. Like, for instance, I use my name. I don't use a pseudonym. I think I've used a pseudonym like twice in my entire life to write like a couple of blogs that I thought were bad. Actually, when I was at Talking Mag, I wrote a few things that I thought were bad, and so I put them under another name. I read them, and I was like, oh, this is shit. I can't improve it, so I'm just going to publish it under another name. And people in the comments are like, oh, this is great. We should have more of this guy, no more Richard Spencer. But anyway, I use my name, and so I have to take responsibility. So, I mean, I can be a bit edgy and outrageous, but at the end of the day, I have to take responsibility for what I'm doing. And that's a problem. So you have to speak.
Did you get that? That's a problem, right? That's a problem, says Richard, that he has to take responsibility for what he says, but he's got a way around it. He's smarter than everyone else. He's going to say different things to different audiences. And this is just going to reduce Richard's agonies in life.
In a certain way, and you do have to wear a certain mask. But
right, if he's telling you he's going to speak in certain ways and he's going to wear a mask and he's going to take the sinister path and he's going to advocate his movement take the sinister path, but nothing to be concerned about here, folks.
What I mean by saying, and so I'm not going to go out and like act immorally or say things that are awful and, worthy of contempt and so on. But what I mean by immoral, and this is what I think everyone needs to be psychologically conditioned to, is,
guys, you got to psych up to take the sinister path.
That we are attempting to undermine the moral fabric of America.
We are seeking to undermine the moral fabric of America. Do you realize how dangerous that is? Do you realize the slender threads by which civilization hangs? And if you unravel those threads, what happens is mass slaughter, right? We're talking mass genocide.
Like, we are doing something. And again, I'm saying this to a particular crowd. I'm not saying this publicly. Like, we aren't moral. And we aren't.
Come on, guys, come join my cause. We aren't moral. We are sinister. We are deceptive.
Doing something that is ultimately like for the good of America or the world as it's currently constituted.
Yeah, it's for the good of America, but a little later he says we don't care about America.
We do want to ultimately undermine the moral system in which we live. So we are. Okay,
so we all have objections to the moral system in which we live, but I certainly don't want to undermine it because I don't see what are the other far superior moral systems out there. I mean, do you want to live in Korea? Do you want to live in Nigeria? Do you want to live in France or Germany or Russia? Do you want to live in Hungary or England or Brazil or Argentina or Guatemala or Honduras or Mexico or Canada? I don't see a lot of other moral systems out there for nation states that I think are just so much more superior to what America offers. Now, compared to a country in your fantasies, yeah, in your fantasies, there are amazing moral systems out there. In your fantasies, there are all these amazing nation states out there that we should emulate. But in reality, not so much.
Sinister. And
it isn't. He wants to go sinister.
We do want to ultimately undermine the moral system in which we live. So we are sinister.
We do want to undermine the moral system in which we live. We are sinister. So that's some pretty edgy content. Just wonder what he means.
And it isn't. I guess I'm stressing this because I think people need to get morally conditioned to what needs to be done, in the sense that there's a lot of happy talk in the movement about like we just want national.
Yeah, we don't want any of that happy talk, guys. We don't want people putting great importance on being happy. No, we want people who are unhappy. We want to attract the miserable, right? We want to attract the dysfunctional. We want to attract the people who aren't cutting it and are filled with rage.
Nationalism and, we just want to all go home again and we're going to all be happy homelands. This is one of my least favorite memes from like Ramsey Paul or whatever. And this is all good.
Why would someone hate the meme of happy homelands? Like, what's wrong with wanting to be happy? What's wrong with wanting to have a happy home? What's wrong with wanting to have a happy homeland? These are all good things. These are all beautiful things.
Whatever. That's not what we're about. We are on a campaign of demoralization, a vicious campaign.
We are on a vicious campaign of demoralization. Gee, I just wonder. I don't know about you, but I just wonder what Richard Spencer really stands for. I mean, what's he really all about?
Fucking 100 times. I am so mad. I am so fucking mad at these people. They don't do this to fucking me. We're gonna fucking ritualistically humiliate them. I am coming back here every fucking weekend if I have to. Like, this is never over. I win. They fucking lose. That's how the world fucking works. Little fucking kikes. They get ruled by people like me. Little fucking octoroons. My ancestors fucking enslaved those pieces of fucking shit. We're gonna win. I rule the fucking world. Those pieces of shit get ruled by people like me. They look up and see a face like mine looking down at them. That's how the fucking world works. We are gonna destroy this fucking...
Wow, he sounds a lot like...
Do Black Lives Matter to you? Do Black Lives Matter to you? Do Black Lives Matter, right, Karen? Fucking white piece of shit, you little fucking pussy-ass bitch! Oh, yeah? You wanna fucking go, Karen? No! No! Until Black Lives Matter! Until Black Lives Matter, no life matters!
Yeah, Richard sounds a bit like the Black Lives Matter activists.
A campaign of revenge, you could say.
Yeah, come join me on my campaign of revenge and demoralization. It's guaranteed to be sinister and dishonest.
A campaign that's going to undermine and demean all of the things that most people hold sacred.
We are on a campaign to undermine and demean most things that people hold sacred. Wow, that couldn't possibly go wrong. What kind of people will be attracted to this?
And I mean that very seriously. That's not something that I was going to say, but like...
He means this very seriously. Yeah, I think he really does mean this very seriously. It means that this evil rant that he goes on, this is who he is.
Coming back here like a fucking 100 times. I am so mad. I am so fucking mad at these people. They don't don't do this to fucking me!
Yeah, that rant, that is who Richard is. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't something that was not reflective of him.
The world, we can't, like, I don't think we should go out there and fight every battle. I think that's something that I really learned and so on. Like, if you're just resisting everything, you're just going to get bulldozed at some point. But what we ultimately want to accomplish is really the opposite of the current moral system. And so from the perspective...
Okay, think about the opposite of the current moral system. So you have a flawed country, but still it would rank definitely in the top 2% of best run countries. We have a crime problem, but probably less crime than 80% of countries. Right? We have unparalleled levels of prosperity and freedom. And he wants the opposite of these things.
Perspective of the moral system, from the perspective of real America, we are evil.
From the perspective of real America, we are evil.
On the
get into this kind of like anti-China posting or trains, and if they want exactly, or their vision for a world. I know their vision for right now, like the Chinese people, the Chinese Communist Party, and Chimerica relationship, but I don't understand, and I don't know if they have something beyond that.
Had a system of sun, but
it's very pertinent here. You know,
they failed to colonize Vietnam.
Talk about China.
Decades.
And in World War II, Japan, even going
deal of Mongol DNA. China has been relevant. Greens talk about how.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I see where you're going, but I do kind of. I don't have any kind of like inherent antagonism towards the Chinese or something, but you know, it has to be about us and not, you know, is it?
Wow, who's the us? Okay, it has to be all about us, but who's the us that Richard is campaigning for?
Necessarily a good thing. I don't know. You know, I've heard a lot of people who are very pro-Russia say, well, you know, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, this is kind of like a rough draft or a experiment in an illiberal power taking on the West or whatever. And I don't know. I sense a lot of wishful thinking and kind of LARPing in statements like that. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing. It obviously can coexist with America becoming extremely liberal, and it's really what do they see in us? Like, what do they see that is this going to help us in some way? But I'm not interested in like the triumph of illiberalism around the world. You know, I'm just simply interested in the triumph of, you know, the future of Aryans.
Oh, he's not a white nationalist, but all he's interested in is the triumph of Aryans. So he's an Aryan nationalist, but he's not a white nationalist. Right? All this rhetoric over the past few years, oh, I'm not a white nationalist anymore. It's BS.
Interested in like the triumph of illiberalism around the world. You know, I'm just simply interested in the triumph of, you know, the future of Aryans. And so I don't know. I mean, I think it's an open question.
I suggested that illiberalism is a goal. Certainly didn't mean to suggest that. It's just the goal that you stated would not illiberalism be a necessary pretext for it. It's necessary, not sufficient. It's not sufficient. It's necessary.
Well, my point about China is and Japan is that those two civilizations, they only look next door. They don't have the same global looking outward that the Western world.
Oh, Richard, there's a cap to the sort of almost like, and if every conservative
or
absolutely
or something negativity. I think that's a question I you about question to ask is a kind of okay. When I might have seen this interview. I've certainly seen a lot of Jared Taylor
talking about a Jared Taylor interview on Australian 60 Minutes
interviews, but I imagine what she's saying is a kind of challenge in a way. It's like, what are you about other than hating on blacks or Hispanics or something? And isn't that actually a good question to ask? You know, because I mean, I don't know. I'm maybe not as much of a fan of Jared Taylor as you are. I mean, I think that is a good question for a lot of these groups. Like, what are you about? Like, you're talking about crime or these illegals flying across the border and so on. Like, what are you really offering that isn't just pure negativity? I think that's a question I ask myself a lot. I mean, that's a good question, and maybe it was bluntly put, but I don't know. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I feel like that kind of thing has been tried, and I just love my people. Well, do we just love our people? I mean, our people got us into this situation.
I know, but it's like
flaws within us brought us to this point. And our people don't necessarily love us. And so like the white race isn't just behind us in the way that they are behind like Al Sharpton or something. The blacks are to a very much greater extent behind.
So he's only interested in Aryans, but really only a small percentage of Aryans. Richard tweets, Bitcoin is useless. Say what you will about gold bugs. They are more grounded in reality than Bitcoin enthusiasts.
Behind Al Sharpton than they are behind the whites are behind Jared Taylor. So it's a more difficult relationship. And I think it does raise some questions that are worth asking. And I understand what you're saying. And I'm not suggesting that we act in a public manner in some kind of like just vile manner and just, become a Jerry Springer caricature and, go up and say, down with Jews on a talk show. And
God forbid, God forbid. Richard tweets, people with mental and developmental disabilities have the right to vote in America. Might overturning Roe v. Wade, among other things, be an attempt to generate a new constituency for the GOP in red states?
Whatever. I think that's obviously not a good thing. But like to hate something is to want something better.
Yes, I agree with Richard on Bitcoin. I came out hard against Bitcoin about 18 months ago.
It is to want to kind of overcome our current situation. And so we kind of do have to hate whites on some level.
So he has no interest in non-Aryans, and he also hates whites. He wants to pursue a sinister, immoral agenda. I don't know where this could go wrong.
We're not good enough. We got ourselves in this position. We're not getting ourselves out of it. We're doing all sorts of silly things as resistance. And we do kind of need to at least psychologically understand that among ourselves. Whether we say that publicly is debatable, but how we understand ourselves now, I don't think it should be. To hate something can be pure resentment. And in that sense, I think it is very negative, just to kind of like, well, I hate all these Mexicans, and these blacks are committing crime. I hate them. The Jews are in control.
Yeah, Richard is interesting because he has a higher degree of self-awareness than most.
Control of Wall Street. I hate them. That's pure resentment. But hating the world in the sense that we want to overcome it, we want to see something else, that is a different type of emotion. And I do think, we're not in a situation, and I remember saying this actually at an Ameren conference many years ago now, like we're not in a situation where we can just, like the white race is just being exterminated. And, we're just on the gangplank and we're like, well, I love my people and I'll sacrifice for them. We're not in that situation. We're in a very different situation. And, I think that kind of like, well, I just love my people thing. I'm not sure that is how we should understand ourselves. Whether we can communicate that to the public is not a bad thing. I mean, I love my people. I love what we can be. And so I think there are ways of communicating that to the public, but that is PR. At the end of the day, like I do hate whites.
At the end of the day, I do hate whites. I mean, this does make you quite the compelling talker.
Don't you see an innate contradiction in hating us because we hate us?
No, the more ironic, the better, I think.
Wait, hold on. What did you say? Hating us because we hate us? What do you mean?
Isn't that paradoxical to hate us because we hate us?
No, well, it's not. It is paradoxical, but I think that's, we hate ourselves, and I hate that. Yeah. It is kind of a paradox, but paradoxes are good.
I hate that. To say that I hate us because I hate us, I agree with that. Just another level of intricacy there. But it was purely just PR because I mean, people might just roll their eyes at me being sort of the white collar wanker. Just look at my avatar for God's sakes, and look at that parted hairline. Just screams wanker. But I mean, I just see, even if it's possible, and I think it definitely is what you're suggesting. To sound so lovey-dovey and ridiculous. In 2 centuries, say I agree with you, rightly see that appalled. I mean, to say that
disarming and reframing is one of the most powerful things you can do.
But anyway, we're not expecting a big thank you letter in the mail this Friday. We're going to do it regardless.
Yeah, I get it, but I think disarming and reframing is one of the most powerful things you can do. And maybe just saying you love the white race is not really doing that. I mean, one of the powerful thing about Jesus was his ability to reframe a question. And maybe saying, actually, I hate whites, that might disarm the Karen a little bit more.
You might be right there.
Because it's not what her mind is, it has a logic to it. It's going in a certain direction. Then you say, you disrupt that.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, I agree with you. Whites are terrible. That's why we need to change.
You actually, sorry to keep on waffling over you, but where I am, it's sort of very much.
I want the ones who may be innately predisposed to that.
I use this example during the Trump administration, like LGBTQ identification went from like 10% to 20% among Zoomers and young millennials. And so, you know, I don't know what to say. There seems to be something about our culture that kind of can't be resisted. And a lot of this does adhere to the kind of spiteful mutants concept of Dudden and others, of like, we're breeding people who are mentally ill and prone to heart disease and all sorts of things. So there are things that we kind of...
Like, if you don't die young of infectious disease, you're going to die of a long-running disease, whether it's cancer or heart disease. Doesn't matter how much you work out or what you eat. In the end, you're going to die. And if you don't die quickly from infectious disease, you're very likely to die from cancer and heart disease, and there's never going to be a cure.
Can't resist. And you know, I don't know, this idea that we just need to be like saving everyone, I feel is a losing prospect. And sometimes the best attitude towards this is like, look, these people are going to die. They're not going to reproduce, you know? Like, do we want to have a compulsory girlfriend for everyone on 4chan? You know, like that would create horrifying consequences of all of these like incel types having multiple children or so. I mean, again, I don't think this is going to happen, of course, but like it's a dark prospect. So I don't know. I mean, what we say to the outside world and how we analyze things and what we say to each other might be very different things. And it's kind of hard psychologically to talk to different audiences, but I think it is a skill that we need to learn. This all gets back to my general concept of the sinister quality of what we're up to. When did I link this?
The sinister quality of what we're up
they
to.
Ultimately want what we want. Now, with the real American type people, would they have it better in a world run by us? Of course, but they don't know that, and I don't think we really have anything to offer them. Like, if I were to offer thinking people, telling them like, I am literally with Mark attempting to create a new religion, and this is very, you know, outrageously ambitious, you could say, but we are actually going to do it, and it is very serious what we are doing. But this might take decades, and it is not something that I might even not see it. And what we need to do is create, like,
I may not get
again,
there
the
with
left-hand
you.
path and just smaller communities.
This is his Martin Luther King speech. I may not get there with you, but I see the promised land.
That are trying to engage in projects and influence on our own. If I pitch that to the guy in Kalispell who was screaming at me, he would just scream at me or laugh at me. He wants nothing to do with it.
Can't comprehend it. Yeah.
No. If he comprehends it, it sounds awful.
Yeah, because that type of person is so partial to just grabbing a pitchfork and screaming obscenities, and they want, I mean, there's a reason why Trump, of course, appealed to them, is because he's just a buffoonish, and they see themselves in him, like just someone that'll be crude and vulgar and outrageous, and that's what appeals to them. Whereas the sort of, I don't mean this in a facetious way, like just this sort of intellectual approach, and again, that word, the clandestine approach of, no, this is very, very difficult stuff that's got to be, you know, made incrementally. They just look at you and go, and that homosexual. Right. So every time I listen to one of your things, Richard, there's some hideous, vulgar cretin rings up with the homosexual. So I can't believe it. Said you want to do it type of thing.
Do you know how, like, if it were a basketball score of the amount of pussy I've gotten in my life and the amount of pussy achieved by the guy calling me gay, it would be like the Harlem Globetrotters versus the Washington Generals. It would be like 100-0 or something.
And that's the obvious part. I mean, the Freudian part. Let's not even mention the Freudian part of it, but that's even funny.
Wow, Rich has gotten so much pussy, guys.
Anyway,
so much.
I'm already.
So,
they are talking
I
about
don't know,
states, individual states within the nation, not the nation state, right? The right, you know, the
Robert
state.
Wright, Mickey Kaus.
They mentioned the word state.
Regulation, state militia. I don't know.
Yeah, the state militia.
About the Supreme Court gun
The answer is
ruling.
I don't know. The third thing is I'm told that the people say that the gun bill that just passed does have some very positive implications for background checks of guns. It eliminates some of the bureaucratic problems involved in actually checking people, so that there is actual progress there.
You know, it's so far from serious legislation. By the way, what the Second Amendment says is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, with state capitalized. Whatever.
Who knows what that means?
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, it's imagine the counter whatever it is the counter history, whatever it's called. Counterfactual. If alternative history, if this court had not issued Roe in 73, we'd be a much more peaceful place. We would have had debates in the legislature. The right to lifers would have had their say. They would have lost in most of them, but won in some of them. They would have hopes for winning more next year. Likewise, if the pro-abortion people had lost, they would have hopes for winning again next year. And we wouldn't have had this whole, it would be one area where like the sides are at each other at loggerheads, at increasingly violent loggerheads, that would have been eliminated. The issue is, I think I talked about this before, maybe not, that does that mean that getting rid of Roe will produce peace? I think not. I think things are too far gone now. I think some legislators are going to introduce a bill. I think it already has been introduced, saying women who consider an abortion can be committed to a mental institution. It's not going to pass, but people are going to go to extremes to try to get attention, because that's as you pointed out, that's the social environment we live in now. Whereas if we'd had 50 years of peaceful solution, democratic solution of the abortion dilemma, we'd be in much better shape, despite the environment of social media where everybody tries to be extreme.
Yeah, I don't think things are going to get a lot more peaceful on that front. I mean, one thing I said I'm kind of worried about is if the Democrats make it their rallying cry that we need to elect senators who will select justices who will reverse Roe, that there will be a counter reaction to that by Republicans. I don't know. And that's why I'd like more emphasis on the rallying cry, on the guns rallying cry, like give states the right to regulate the carrying of guns in public. That just should seem, to most people, I think that's uncontroversial. They would, and I think they should make that the big thing. But
I think they're both pretty big things. But I
think the second one evokes less of a counter. It's less amenable to the Republicans using, you're saying that, to drive their people to the polls. That's my argument. Is that
there are a lot of pro-gun people. I mean, the Democrats haven't pushed this issue for years because they lost West Virginia because of the gun issue. So the Democrats have been terrified of the pro-gun populace. The other thing is Roe puts it back in the hands of the state legislature. So there will be fights in the state legislature. So the Democratic Party up and down the line will have an argument, vote for us. The gun decision takes it out of the hands of the state legislature. So electing a Democratic state legislator isn't going to do you any good. All the focus has to be at the top on the Supreme Court. And that's a fight we've had those sorts of fights for decades and decades. And it's not clear that this gives the Democrats that much more leverage. It's true that it's slightly, in some guises, it may put the law and order issue on their side, which is a big deal.
I just mean, I think there are a whole lot of people who are pro-gun and exercised about the gun thing up to a point, but don't really want to carry one to their Walmart. Like, they want to have the gun, they want to be able to go hunting, they want to have it in their house, they want to go to the shooting range. They don't need to carry it.
And they don't want other people to have it.
And then they may not. They actually may not want other people carrying it.
Well, that's the big issue.
I mean, in fact, some of them may be white people who don't want black people carrying them around.
Well, that's a huge sleeper issue that's wildly underestimated by the NRA, which is that black people with guns terrify white people. Right. So if the NRA equally enforces the right to the Second Amendment, which they have to do because that's the right thing to do, there are going to be a lot of people carrying guns that white people don't want to carry guns, and it's a big emotional sort of undercurrent issue that is never addressed, except one can talk about it in podcasts.
And you see a guy, 100 yards from your house, and he's got a gun. You can't call the police. Is that what Americans want?
No, I think if you see the gun, you can't call the police.
No, you can't. If anyone's allowed to carry a gun.
Do you think this applied to unconcealed open carry?
I believe. Yeah, I do. I believe it applied to both.
I didn't know that. I mean, the actual.
Yeah, that's the big sleeper issue. How are people going to feel? How are white people going to feel when a large number of black people are walking around carrying guns?
Likeable Democrats in Congress. They have joined forces on the issue, Elizabeth Warren and Sandy Cortez, and they're suggesting that Joe Biden can issue an executive order authorizing the construction of abortion camps, federal clinics on federal lands. Watch.
There are other places the president could act to dampen the ability of these companies to track women who travel out of state to an abortion clinic, to provide funds for people who are traveling, and to look into the use of federal lands.
We have many ideas. We have some ideas coming from Senator Warren, signed a letter along with 25 other Democratic senators asking President Biden to explore opening healthcare clinics on federal lands in red states.
We're not going to help you raise your standard of living, afford food or gasoline or housing, but we can help you not to have a family. Abby Johnson is a former Planned Parenthood director. She joins us tonight. Abby, thanks so much for coming on. Abortion camps on federal lands. Did you ever think you'd hear this?
Never. But hey, maybe Elizabeth Warren can get us a discount from her tribal ancestors or something. But listen, this would be extreme executive overreach if this actually happened. And I mean, you're exactly right. Hey, they don't want to spend any money on actually helping women who are pregnant, but hey, let's spend billions of dollars on, building abortion clinics on what, Native American land or our federal parks. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Let's just provide for women who need resources for their babies right now. Women couldn't even get formula a few weeks ago, but yeah, let's just build abortion clinics instead.
What I don't understand is where's the meaning in American life? I mean, if having children has no meaning, if it's not the main source of joy in a person's life, then what is? I mean, Netflix? Like, what are they offering up to replace the void of children?
Well, I mean, they're really not offering anything right now. I mean, you know, Tucker, when people, you know, that saying is when people tell you who they are, you should believe them. These are people who are currently, you know, firebombing pregnancy centers. They are calling to kill babies. We need to believe them. These aren't pro-choice people. These are people who want to kill babies. They are pro-abortion. We need to believe them when they say that.
Yeah. Yeah, I never used to call people pro-abortion. I always felt it was an honest disagreement. I've always been pro-life, but I always respected people who disagreed. I didn't think they were pro-abortion, but they are. And it's shocking to me. Abby, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
A majority of justices on the Supreme Court just voted to overturn Roe v. Wade. Of course, that's why we're having this conversation. But weirdly, the Democratic Party is focusing on just one of them. The black one. That would be Clarence Thomas. Here's Lieutenant Governor of California. Watch.
This decision is delegitimizing the Supreme Court. Who is Clarence Thomas? Is he my Saudi Arabian father who's going to tell me what I can and cannot do with my body, with my life? And that's what this is coming down to. So these people have a misconception about who is going to listen to them.
There's the vax mandate lady whining about people telling her what to do with her body. Please. Shh. Actor Samuel L. Jackson also went after Clarence Thomas with a racial attack. Quote, how's Uncle Clarence feeling about overturning Loving versus Virginia? Loving versus Virginia, of course, Supreme Court case that overturned precedent. It held that bans on interracial marriage were unconstitutional. So these are just racial attacks. Why against Clarence Thomas of all the 6 members who voted to overturn Roe v. Wade? Mark Paoletta is an attorney, a close friend of Clarence Thomas. He has a new book called Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in His Own Words, and a film. We just interviewed him the other day. He joins us again tonight. Mark, thanks so much for coming on. So it does seem like, so you had 6 Supreme Court justices vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. Again, you could be for legal abortion and still recognize that Roe v. Wade was an absurd Supreme Court decision that degraded the institution of the court and be against it. But why Thomas? Why are they going after 1 out of 6?
Because the left is racist, Tucker. They expect Clarence Thomas to think the way a black man should based on the color of his skin. And Clarence Thomas, for 30 years, 40 years, has refused to do that, and they want to destroy him. And that's what they've been doing and coming after him. And the bottom line is, Clarence Thomas doesn't care at all what they think.
It's just so funny, though. I mean, if you compare the attitudes of the average black guy in America to the average white liberal in America on abortion, the black guy is way more opposed to abortion than the average white liberal. So why does Clarence Thomas have to have the same views as an NPR listener?
And that's what he's been saying for 40 years, and it's the left demands it, and they will go after him. But it is a great day for the Constitution, you know, with Roe being overturned, with the Second Amendment being strengthened, consistent with the Constitution, with religious liberties today coming down, consistent with the Constitution. And it's all aligning with where Clarence Thomas has been for the past 30 years.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. He's been saying it this whole time, as you point out in your book. Mark, great to see you again. Thank you.
Yeah, Clarence Thomas is leading the way on the Supreme Court.
We're broadcasting from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil tonight, one of the most famous cities in the world, and for good reason. Certainly one of the most beautiful on the planet. You're looking at the Christ the Redeemer statue that's in the summit of Mount Corcovado, an amazing statue built in the early 30s. We're going to go there later in the week. So the January 6th committee has nothing to do with January 6th. The point of it is to punish the political opponents of the Biden administration and to make certain Donald Trump doesn't run again. And they're doing it with the assistance of the so-called Justice Department as run by Joe Biden. So already the committee, speaking of Stalinist overreach, has had Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro arrested, neither of whom committed any crime. They've also had the Fed search the home of a former DOJ official called Jeffrey Clark, who we spoke to last week. Then on Wednesday, the FBI showed up to seize the phone of a former Trump attorney called John Eastman. Now, critically and illegally, they seized his phone before they presented him with a warrant, and it's on tape. Watch.
Sir, go ahead and put your arms up for me.
Can I see the warrant?
Sir, put your arms up for me.
Can I see the warrant, please? I'd like to see the warrant. I'd like to see the warrant. I'd like to see the warrant. I'd like to see the warrant before you take my property.
Sir, there's nothing wrong right now, sir. Right on.
Here is the warrant. Right. I want you to see that they took my property before providing me with the warrant. I'd like to read the warrant.
Disgraceful. Wearing his little mask, put your hands up as if Eastman is a threat. He's not. He's a lawyer. As you just saw, he's under subpoena from the, speaking of illegitimate, wholly illegitimate, Pelosi-Liz Cheney-led January 6th committee. Mr. Eastman joins us tonight. John Eastman, thank you so much for joining us tonight. What exactly did you do wrong to be treated like a dangerous criminal by your government that you pay for?
Well, we don't know because the warrant doesn't say. It authorizes them to seize my phone and all the information contained in the phone. But there's no indication of any crime that this is connected to. That's apparently in an affidavit, but the affidavit wasn't attached to the warrant. The Fourth Amendment's very...
Wow, extraordinary story here. 42 dead found in a tractor. So let's have a look at this story.
As I put the scanner back on.
Broken too long at altitude, Lima 2141, Sally Port. Apollo 2141, Sally Port.
At least 40.
2141, buddy.
The article says at least 42 people found dead in 18-wheeler on Southwest side.
Do you have anybody who can help us with a traffic stop?
And I don't even know if the scanner is talking about this right now.
Maybe for a suspicious vehicle. 1434, Alpine.
Yeah, let me. For the moment, I'm going to turn the scanner off. For the moment, and I'll turn it back on in a second. I just want to get some of the basic details out here. At least 42 people were found dead inside a tractor trailer on the Southwest side, and 16 others were taken to area hospitals in varying conditions, according to multiple police sources. Several San Antonio police vehicles, as well as fire trucks and ambulances, are covering a portion of Quintana Road in the Southwest side. KSAT had said earlier, we have several crews where at least 20 people were reported dead inside a tractor at Quintana Road and Casson Road. Quintana and Casson. Wow. So let me just get the map up here.
42 dead in a tractor.
Here.
That's extraordinary.
Quintana and Casson. That's going to be on the southwest side of.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that story. So. Meanwhile, let's go back to getting a little bit more here from Richard.
Being opposed to abortion is also pretty predictable, but it goes well beyond that. So they want to create a electoral college for the state of Texas, so that much like our electoral college and our Senate system gives preference to land over population, you could say. This would do that. So they will basically offer their rural voters more power in electing statewide offices like governor and I guess the state senate and things like that. They'll be using a electoral college system. They mentioned secession, so they want to have a referendum in 2023 on whether Texas should reconstitute itself as a republic. And they also have some just funny things in there, like they want stricter laws against corporations that are like woke corporations that are promoting gay rights and CRT and all the stuff that Texas can like use state anti-monopoly power. And then the other thing was these little things that you can easily overlook, but maybe are telling. There were things in there like
San Antonio.
We want stricter laws against doxing and swatting. So, I mean, how many people are really exposed to doxing or swatting? This seems to be something directed at like libs of TikTok and Tim Pool or something. So basically, the Texas law is like a big live stream or something like it's coming from a different place than a lot of this other stuff. So it's a grab bag of like sovereign citizen type stuff, Texas as a republic, not a state type stuff, which has been around for a while, but it's always been treated as rather silly and not serious really. It's like I grew up in Texas. I mean, we would joke about like, oh, well, we might just decide to become a republic again or something like that. And it's a grab bag of like the new right that's emerging online, plus the sovereign citizen stuff, plus the latest conservative outrage. And I was just kind of thinking about this, like, Trump was the best aspects of Trump, and why I like Trump, and I imagine a lot of you did, was he had a Pat Buchanan quality to him. He had a Ross Perot quality to him. Even it was a kind of secular nationalism. Let's reindustrialize. Let's stop getting screwed over by the rest of the world. America first. Like there was a healthy and very normal and kind of, I don't know, mid-century or mid to late century quality about him. I mean, you can find these interviews of Trump on Larry King from like the 80s or early 90s or something, where he's talking about all these issues. Like he's talking about Japan.
Okay, here's we've got Fox News.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Kevin Cork, live in Washington. A passenger train traveling from Los Angeles to Chicago striking a dump truck in rural Missouri. The impact killing 3 people and injuring dozens more. 2 of the people who were killed were on the Amtrak train. Another person was inside the truck. A spokesman for the Missouri State Highway Patrol says local hospitals have received more than 40 patients and are expecting even more victims. The extent of their injuries remains unclear at this hour. The Amtrak train, carrying about 243 passengers and 12 crew members when the collision happened near Minden, that's about 100 miles northeast of Kansas City. The crash caused 7 cars to derail. It's the second Amtrak collision this week. 3 people were also killed Sunday when an Amtrak commuter train smashed into a car in Northern California, as you see the pictures right there. I'm Kevin Cork, live in Washington. Now back to more Tucker Carlson Tonight.
As the United States focuses under the leadership of the Biden administration relentlessly on a conflict in Eastern Europe that is materially irrelevant to our interests, Latin America is falling apart, certainly from an American's perspective. Chile is now in rapid decline and anti-American. So that leaves Brazil as the only large economy in this hemisphere that remains pro-American. It's an enormous economy, 9th biggest in the world. Brazil has some of the deepest reserves of valuable natural resources on the planet. So if you care about the future of the United States, you ought to care deeply about the future of Brazil. And you should certainly be aware of China's strong and ongoing effort to turn Brazil into a Chinese colony. Now, the president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, is again the only pro-American leader left in Latin America. And yet, for the first year and a half of his presidency, our president, Joe Biden, ignored his existence completely. And if anything, the State Department was hostile to the Bolsonaro administration. Recently, Biden did finally meet with Bolsonaro for the very first time at the Summit of the Americas. Felipe Martins is a...
Okay, keep an eye on the...
And we need to make electronics here, and we should stop paying all this money to all these, NATO and things like that. Like, we should get something out of it. Like, it's all stuff that's totally reasonable and secular. He was pro-choice. He was not interested in the religious right, and then just adopted it later on. And so with a lot of the kind of like Texas stuff, like their platform, I could imagine him opposing those things or thinking that they're wrong or off base or whatever. And I think it's an example of like MAGA doesn't need Trump at the end of the day. And he can get he could go to jail for all of the J6 shenanigans, and it won't really matter. There's going to be a kind of renewed and in many ways radical and in many ways unhinged MAGA that will outlast him. And I don't know. I mean, I think we've kind of entered a new realm, and certainly certainly like there's a lot of turning back the clock on issues that I think everyone assumed were basically settled. Abortion being a classic one, but even like the gay issue, like well beyond, trans children and things like that. And so I just think we're in a kind of remarkable state with these guys. And also, I would just say, like, I feel far more alienated from this type of MAGA than I do from, like the Trump of 2016 that never worked out or something. But they're going very hardcore. I don't think that they're going to go hardcore really on immigration issues. They'll go hardcore on like defending the border or whatever. That's a typical boilerplate. I think they're right. I don't think they're going to go hardcore on a lot of the things that were, like the edgy Trump supporter cared about. This agenda didn't mention affirmative action. It did mention allowing people to, without a law degree, to take the bar exam, and allowing other things. Like it was basically like suggesting that everyone become a lawyer. Like, you don't need credentials to be a professional. I guess you could even become a doctor. You could sell people, ivermectin, and also sue, acting pro se effectively, like sue women for having abortions. I mean, it was wacky as hell. Not wacky on a lot of the things that Trump really talked about in 2016. So anyway, I just find it kind of fascinating. And I also would say that I'm, speaking personally, I think they're going wacky and radical in all the wrong directions. But anyway, just a thought. What do you guys think?
Is that, I mean, do you think that that's as good a definition of Trumpism as anything else, like wacky and radical in all the wrong directions?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a kind of earlier version of Trumpism. I think there's probably like a Trumpism that should be rediscovered, but which I think is now kind of like totally impossible. And that is the Trump of the late 80s and 90s. This Trump that is a clearly kind of right wing on some level, but not a culture war issue, but a kind of Perot nationalism. I mean, Buchanan obviously Buchanan gave the speech that defined the culture war, but Buchanan at his most, like interesting, I would say, and his most like appealing to the right type of people, it wasn't the culture war, the abortion stuff, or the Catholicism. It was definitely much more the like, we need to build a wall, we need to control immigration, we need to rethink foreign policy, no history, we're going to become a republic again, we need to, maintain our industries, globalism's failed, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think we are now like well past all of these issues to the point where like, we're not living, it's not like 1986 anymore. And so I feel like a lot of this is just water under the bridge. But I would say that a lot of it remains to me quite appealing and defensible. And I think there is like a version of Trump that you could discover that is like that. I remember Trump was a member of the Reform Party, which came directly out of Perot. And, I don't know. I mean, there's something to be said for the fact that in 2000, he was suggesting that he run for president with Oprah as his VP. Now, obviously, that is cringe as hell. But if you are perhaps overly charitable to him, you see that like he wanted to unite the country. He did not want to become the world's the most divisive, poisonous force in the universe. He wanted to kind of be like, hey, let's get some outsiders here in Washington and let's run this correct and let's really communicate with the people and there was and reform the government and so on. I mean, there's something I find appealing. There's something very normal and healthy about that. Obviously, a lot, I'm speaking for myself here, but a lot of us were just wildly attracted to Trump in 2016. We thought, all of these super edgy, outlandish, taboo issues we could now bring to the fore. I certainly have failed at making like the meaning of Trumpism the things I care about. Now, whether I should be blamed or whether that was a dream to begin with is another question. But there's no doubt that like I don't define Trumpism really at all at this point. And there is going to be a Trumpism without Trump. And I think we're getting a glimpse of it. Like the degree to which the GOP is, activated just can't be underestimated. I've told this story, and maybe some of you guys weren't here yet when I told the story, but so I was meeting, it was actually someone from this group was with me at the time, and I was meeting this woman down in Kalispell. So I live in Whitefish, which is a resort town. It's Montana, but it is a ski resort, so it has a froofy element. There are multimillionaires who have massive houses on the lake and so on like that. Kalispell is also nice, but it's more of a working class town. And so anyway, I was driving. I drove down to Kalispell, and it was actually on Good Friday, so it was in April. And there were these cars that I remember. This car that was like revving its engine, and it had an American flag and then a pirate flag, like a skull and crossbones flag, and it was revving its engine and like honking its horn. I was like, "What in the hell is this? Like, this is a Good Friday celebration? Like, what am I seeing here?" And then I was walking around, and you see all these cars like doing like, what is it, donuts or like spin, like before they were like slamming on the brakes while punching the accelerator. So they were like spinning their tires, like wearing down their rubber tires, and smoke going up in the air before the light turned green. And it was just nuts. And I remember I was with this friend. I was like, oh my God, this is like a Trump thing. And I saw this one car that had a Confederate flag and a Trump flag in Montana. It's like, makes no sense, basically. But anyway, I remember seeing these like kind of, I don't know, wine mom type women. And I was like, is this a Trump rally? And she turned to me, she was like, they do this every Friday. Every Friday they're out. And I was like, they're not even observing like Good Friday. Like they're just out and about. They probably don't even know it's Good Friday. Then after dinner, I was walking back, and this smaller car drove up to me, and the guy got out of his car and he said, fuck Trump. Oh no, excuse me. He says, fuck Biden, fuck the liberals. And then he got in his car and drove off. And I was like, wow, I have come so far. Like 5 years ago, I was saying hail Trump at a rally, and I was all in, and so on. And then I lived to be like denounced by the movement. Like, the old revolutionaries who Stalin like had killed and so on. It was just a very strange feeling. And so anyway, I was thinking, I don't think this guy knew who I was, but I think he just went after me because I was wearing like a black leather jacket and jeans. I think he probably thought he was like, this guy's a hipster. But it was just one of the most remarkable things. And I don't know. I just, when I saw that, I was like, wow, the level of commitment and obsession just can't be underestimated. This is real.
So do you see, and I admit this is the first I've heard about that Texas platform you mentioned, but I mean, do you see a connection between like those Trump people who are out on the street just for the sake of it? They're so jacked up in this energy, got to do something. Do you see a connection between that energy, those people, and that Texas platform? And I mean, it's an honest question. I don't know what the answer is. I don't really have a sense of where these people are coming from or what exactly is going on inside the Republican Party. But I mean, do you think that's, when you do see a kind of a connection between that energy and that platform, do you think that like the people in that group are really jacked up about the kinds of things that were in that Texas platform? Is that really where that energy is now?
Well, yes and no. It's the same people. Now, if you talked to the guy in Montana and asked, like, what do you think? What do you want? What do you think about Texas secession? What do you think about, you know, what were some of the other wackier ones, like an electoral college? Or what do you think? What is your opinion on abortion? They might not be on board with all that stuff, but it is the same type of people. And remember, it's an agenda. It's a platform. I mean, platforms aren't really enacted. They're simply there to kind of unify the party. And I think this was kind of like a debutante and a coming out party. It was like this is who we are, you know, get used to it. This is, you know, like we are literally trying to do this stuff. And, you know, we want to allow anyone to become a lawyer so that they can sue women who have abortions. I mean, it's the same type of people and the same type of mentality, and they are definitely invigorated.
It's fascinating. 42 people died in a truck in San Antonio, and none of the news channels, the major news channels, not Fox News, not CNN, are mentioning it. Like I'm streaming some video from the San Antonio station, and then some independent guy is getting 3 times the views of the San Antonio station, and but nothing on CNN, nothing on ABC News streaming, none of the other news streaming services are saying anything. And you know why? Because these are 42 illegal immigrants, and the thinking of the news executives is people don't really care. So if it'd been 3 American citizens, such as in that Amtrak incident, then yeah, it'd be all over the news. But 42 dead Mexicans or Guatemalans, and nobody in the American news business seems to care on any of the major networks. Interesting.
And I think the January 6th commission or committee is going to work on a lot of moderate types. It's obviously going to work on liberals. And but I think it will work on a lot of moderate types. But like there is a large percentage of the population that doesn't care. And even if Trump is like humiliated or even sent to prison, like it just won't matter for them. They've moved on, and they're now.
So on the news channels, they're covering Brittany Griner's arrest in Russia. They're covering the Stanley Cup. They're talking about this dead black artist. Lots of things that they have to talk about. They're talking about the Supreme Court ruling allowing that football coach to pray in the center of the field, but 42 dead immigrants and crickets. I can't find one national news service or international news service talking right now about 42 dead immigrants in San Antonio. So 3 dead expected, apparently, Americans in an Amtrak accident. Yeah, that gets a lot of coverage. 42 dead immigrants. Nobody cares. Wow.
Oh, I mean, again, using this as this platform as one example, they don't need his approval or endorsement.
It's interesting because I mean, the one constant really is completely explained very well.
Every word. And the Q cult made him a religious figure. I mean, it was a cult of personality. That's very clear. But I don't know. It's almost, to use like a 20th century analogy, it's almost like Stalin dies and then the Bolsheviks come back or something. Like it, as opposed to the Soviet Union kind of settling in and becoming more conservative and, in the other sense of the word, and kind of reasonable in a way. Certainly more reasonable than it was under Lenin or Stalin. It's almost like the Bolsheviks came back or something. And I don't know. I just don't think. This is my sense of it. It's like, you know, it's to underestimate them, to think that it's a mere cult of personality.
Because I'll admit, if you had asked me what Trumpism without Trump looked like, the best answer I might have come up with was something like DeSantis, which obviously is obviously it's a less interesting thing to talk about.
So I just scrolled through the last 35 minutes of the PBS NewsHour. Nothing on 42 dead migrants in San Antonio.
If also much saner, but he seemed to really kind of fill the gap, at least, of a lot of the culture war.
What killed them? Well, they were in a tractor and they were just overcome by heat. So we've got 42 dead migrants in
He's the
San
one
Antonio.
who rushed to that scene to see what he can do. Let's listen to what he
At
had
least
to
42
say
dead.
about this grim discovery.
40 people plus have died, and many people have been taken to the hospital, so we don't know how many people exactly, but at the end of the day, we'll just try to help as many people as we can.
So you just heard Antonio Fernandez there, the president of Catholic Charities, just saying that he, like us, doesn't know exactly how many people died inside of that tractor trailer. How many people also escaped? That's something we're still trying to find out. We have SAPD, Texas Rangers there at the scene, multiple law enforcement agencies trying to get information about exactly what happened here today. What we do know as we try to dig up this information is that it's unfortunate that these people were inside of that tractor trailer. We don't know who was driving it. We don't know where they were driving from, where they were going to, why they stopped, how many people total were inside of that tractor trailer. But you can be sure that this is information that we are trying to get for you.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that story out of San Antonio. Just
cultural and anti-elite signaling that Trump did. You know, he's kind of covered those bases in the sense of doing a lot of social conservative stuff, and Trump covered that base too, but also this kind of anti-elitist, kind of rabble-rousing cultural stuff with the Disneyland stuff and the quote unquote anti-grooming stuff. And so that was my sense of more where it was going. I've seen polls that have him doing quite well against Trump among Republicans. But yeah, stuff. But yeah, there is this. At the same time, there is this.
Yeah, imagine if they could somehow blame Trump for this, then it would be leading all the news. But because they can't find an angle to blame Republicans, all the national news services completely ignoring the story out of San Antonio. Amazing
energy out there that has more to do with, say, Q and with the anti-vax stuff than it does with any personality, let's say. And yeah, is that really going to sort of settle back down and be sort of absorbed or co-opted by something like DeSantis, or is it going to go into some bizarre new direction? I don't know the answer on this.
Right. I mean, DeSantis is aping Trump to a large degree, but he's also kind of Trump 2.0 as well, because he's done things, like Trump would often do the stuff. Like I remember even back in 2016, where this is a controversy that's long past, and I don't think it's even really that relevant anymore. But remember when I think it was Apple Computer refused to give the FBI.
So the news media is covering multiple deaths in a Russian strike on a Ukrainian mall, but 42 dead in San Antonio. Crickets.
Like backdoor access, and there was this terrorist act in California, I believe. Do you remember this controversy?
Only vaguely.
Yeah.
There was a terrorist act in some kind of spree shooting or mass shooting to some extent. And there was a terrorist act, and then they said, oh, they used an iPhone, and so Apple should give them the backdoor access. And Apple kind of stood firm. They said, well, we know this is heinous, but we actually have this priority that we do protect the security of our users. Now, I think the whole thing became moot, and like the FBI got in the iPhone anyway or something. But it was a bunch of moral signaling, basically. But I remember Trump was like, let's boycott the iPhone. And he just kind of ad hoc decided to start a boycott, which I think also had no effect. I mean, the whole thing is water under the bridge. But what I'm saying is he would do that, like go after companies. And
so the San Diego station has stopped covering the story live so they can play Wheel of Fortune.
Probably even better examples of this. But DeSantis like playing hardball with Disney based on the Don't Say Gay bill, so-called, and a lot of like online energy about grooming and libs of TikTok and all that stuff. It's kind of a 2.0 thing. And I think DeSantis is, Trump was the creature from the internet, but I think DeSantis is maybe even more. DeSantis is definitely like taking his cues from the internet. And so, I don't know. I mean, I think it's, I mean, the whole thing is just a complicated, matter. I think I do think he's kind of like the next thing to a large degree. And I think he's almost like taken things that were present in Trump and kind of accentuated them.
I think maybe this is Ross, new member, new caller. I just was thinking DeSantis is sort of Trump with a brain in the sense of what one person said. So he's a little more, he's actually more of a traditional politician, but I'm actually here from North Georgia, so my representative is Marjorie Taylor Greene. So that's, so a little bit, I think she's the true Trump, 2.0, or maybe the heir. When actually they thought, go with force.
in 2016. I think Steve. I think it's safe to say that he's very pro-Israel. I mean, Steve Bannon was a pretty mainstream Republican in many ways, and still is. But yeah, he's definitely pro-Israel. I've never heard him say anything. Yeah.
Also, Breitbart, which of course he was at for a while, was literally founded in Israel. And
Yes.
I think he was also a pretty big booster of the idea of moving the embassy to Jerusalem.
Yeah. But Steve Bannon is kind of back. I mean, I remember Steve Bannon was like denounced by Trump and things back. It was after Charlotte's, or did he got kicked out? Called.
Another question I had, today, of course,
to like differentiate exactly, because when you're that desperate, and there's a point at which a lot of these things that a disinterested observer would find ridiculous, when you're that desperate, you believe. And so I think also, like, the best con men believe their own con. So I do think that it was some weird combination. I don't think he was twirling his mustache, basically saying like, oh, I don't believe any of this. The more implausible, the better, or something like that. I don't think he was that cynical. I think he did believe it to some extent. And he's got a certain kind of intelligence. He is kind of brilliant in his way, but he's not exactly like a strategic. Oh, I mean, he is a strategic. He's got some brilliant intelligence for like knowing where centers of energy are and going towards them. And I think.
Yeah, this is Richard there talking about Trump. Bell says, Luke, why did YouTube forward and start allowing Trump speeches again? Is it pressure? Is it loot? At some point, Trump has to start being allowed back onto YouTube, and his speeches, again, have to be allowed to be carried live. When exactly that crosses over, will JFKRP head back to YouTube if Odyssey keeps having live streaming troubles? So sad to hear that about Odyssey. Maybe live streaming on Rumble is the way to go. So I'm thinking about that, or DLive.
I think it's even a kind of like real estate strategy in a way, where he wants to go to a kind of undervalued like neighborhood in order to make a lot of money off it. And I think he did that to a very large degree by just like leaning into the birth certificate stuff with Obama, or all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I guess I kind of lost my train there. I think he believed it. I think his type of mind is not an analytic mind or like a lawyerly mind or a scholarly mind. And so he sees some nonsense on the internet. He's like, what the fuck is this?
So when I was a teenager, I remember reading about the Obama birth certificate, and I knew it was baloney because his mother was an American citizen, and at birth it didn't matter where he'd be born, he'd be an American citizen regardless. Right. And thus eligible for the presidency. So even if he was born.
Wow, so these people apparently died in a Walmart parking lot. All right? So 42 people have been found dead in a sweltering tractor trailer at a Walmart parking lot in San Antonio. Nobody deserves to die in a Walmart.
Born in Kenya, the fact he's an American mother would make it like just a non-issue from day one.
In the Constitution. And this did come up to a certain extent, even citizen, so he's in. It is more complicated than that. Elected. I couldn't imagine.
Very accurate when they say that like that
qualifying you because X, Y, Z. Yeah, I'm just saying there is a more of a nuanced legal question than what you might see sort of at first glance, let's say.
Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, we're also just bearing.
And do I ever watch Kino Casino? I did a bit about 2 months ago. So it's not a regular thing that I watch, but when I hear they've got an extraordinary show, I'll dip into parts of it.
The lead here. I mean, that whole birth certificate thing is just 100% about race. Like,
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
The liberals are often just like very accurate when they say that, like, yeah, this is about race. Like, this is not that no one brought it up. I think it got brought up like almost ironically with Ted Cruz, but like no one talked about it. And it's just like, who is this guy? Is he a Muslim? We don't know. Where is he from?
I believe there were more among Republican voters. There was some poll that came out during the 2016 cycle, I think. Like among Republican voters, more of them thought that Obama was born overseas than thought that Ted Cruz was born overseas. Something like that.
Yeah. But wow, it's wild stuff.
Well, I think that narrative of the birth certificate.
It's rare that you hear someone mention Perot. He had a huge effect, or at least was kind of symptomatic of all this stuff. And that paleo. The paleo conservative moment was very similar to the alt-right moment. I mean, the alt-right moment was certainly more uncouth and more wild and
dead in
younger
San Antonio now.
And stupid. but that had a lot to do with the fact that the internet wasn't around in 1996, and so you just had this onboarding of all of these young people, and but it was definitely, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of there are many similarities between it, and I think we can kind of learn from it, because first off, I think with the paleoconservative movement, there's a problem with the kind of like ideological incoherence. So you had Samuel Francis, who was very theoretical and was moving towards populism, middle American radicals, and National Socialism, as he said himself. I'm not trying to slander him or anything. And he was moving towards this idea, and in total, I would say also kind of like total rejection of the kind of like Southern anti-state strategy, like, oh, we believe in states' rights, or the get the government off my back, or so on. I mean, Sam Francis was like, we need the government on your back. Like, we need a new a political regime that will bring to heel the managerial regime in corporations and so on. So anyway, Murray Rothbard was just a full-on anarchist. I mean, to his credit, I mean, he was very ideologically consistent, but those were incompatible, those two ideologies. And so I think there was like a lot of incoherence. And I think with the alt-right, there was a lot of just like trolling silliness where it could never get to an ideology, because it was all about 4chan and memes and being silly and so on. And I'm guilty of all this as well, just to be honest. Maybe I recognize that it was less guilty, but yeah, it was all about being outrageous and being young and crazy. And there's some good things about that, but it can't really go anywhere. So I guess my vision is that I think this populism as like an energy, and it's almost like an intergenerational energy, because you can definitely see a lot of this in like Wallace, and you can see it in Perot, you can see it in Donald Trump in the year 2000 with the Reform Party, you can see it in Buchanan, you can see it in the Tea Party. There's this like intergenerational energy, a force that animates a certain people, and it is a class to a large extent, but it does go beyond just a kind of like middle America kind of thing. It's a little more widespread, but you can, maybe if you can locate it somewhere, it is that a middle American radical and a kind of middle class or lower middle class. It's not exactly a working class thing like from Marxism. So it's more of a kind of a middle revolt.
So
oh yeah, go ahead. Well, you can ask the question, then I'll go on. Go ahead.
Oh, so when you say it's a lower class thing, but also an intergenerational thing, this vision of
I said a middle class thing. I didn't say lower class, but I think maybe it's actually becoming more lower class as all of our prospects are declining and so on. But I think there's at the very least a middle quality to it. It's not like I'm a union worker. I understand myself as working class, but you have elements of that, yes. But the bigger thing I think is actually middle.
I would define it as more as income oriented. So I would say that it's people that pay tax, as far as, because you've got a lot of people that pay tax are not on these social.
Plus the older guy whose wife left him.
There are a lot of people who just live on the internet and have no prospects and don't want to have any prospects. I also, with January 6th, that was a middle age revolt as well. So the average age was like 42 or 45 or something like that. Maybe a little bit surprising, in the sense that you might think that if there's going to be a hot revolution, it's going to be people in their 20s or something. Suicide bombers are in their 20s. But it was middle. Also, higher level of divorce among January 6th protesters than among the general public. So I think there was something to that. Like Ashley Babbitt was kind of, at her wit's end financially, from what we know. And so there was a lot of stress, and maybe getting away from like the tax-paying middle class. I think that had a lot to do with the Southern strategy, no question. But yeah, I don't know. I would just still stress this middle, plus some 4chan guys in their teens and 20s.
Yeah, one thing I would say is like kind of like back to what you're saying is that you look back to whether it's the 50s, the 80s, maybe even the 90s, and I don't think America was this like tense. There might have been some anti-white propaganda, but probably not as much as like what happened in the 2000s onward. And just divorce rates, like you said, people maybe having struggle meeting partners, finances, whatever. I wasn't around, but I'm probably just guessing that the 80s and 90s were probably, at least the 80s was probably a lot better at a time.
$200,000 things like real, you'll never own, no question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's very, particularly with Zoomers and a lot of millennials. I mean, this kind of like, you'll never own a house, you will never really be a taxpayer, and you don't have any prospects, and you have $200,000 of student loan debt. I mean, that's a real experience for many people. That kind of like bourgeois dream is over. I mean, I think even Trump said this at his rally. Like he would say things like he's like, the American dream is dead. You know, he would say really tough stuff like that, but he was getting at something. But anyway, what I would say is that moving forward, I definitely think that there will be a continuation of this energy, this intergenerational energy that might even have a kind of biological basis. You know, like it's the same, your grandfather was for Wallace and your father was for Buchanan and you are for Trump. Like there's something to this. And I don't think it will go away. But I don't also think that it can really win or be viable. And, you know, just speaking for myself, I think on some level it needs to be ignored or kind of criticized or understood. That is not something that I would want to get invested in. I do think that my vision is to...
Right, this seems to be the biggest mass death event in the United States since the Las Vegas shooting, and it's getting no national news coverage.
Be frank, more conspiratorial and
by no, I mean very little. Okay, it's been mentioned here and there, but because it's Mexicans, the national news doesn't care.
Sinister, to be honest. And I guess I mean sinister in both senses of that word. The left-handed path. Like, we cannot just be up front and stand in front of a bulldozer. We need to have a unified group ideologically, and that group also needs to be unified socially. But that might not be something that's ever out in front, or it's not exactly front stage. I would much prefer to host meetings that are more like Davos, World Economic Forum, that is invitation only and that are private and in fact, you know, secret, than something that is like, let's go to Charlottesville and stand up for the statue.
It's kind of extraordinary what's going on with ABC News. Okay, they've got an ABC News live stream, and they're joking around, right? They just think everything's just so funny, and the room raider, the story behind a perfect 10, and this is what they're talking about. All right, 42 dead Mexicans. You've got all these live news outlets, and they're just laughing it up. They're just having a yuck. Room raider, the story behind a perfect 10. When I don't know about you, I want more information about 46 dead people in a tractor in a Walmart parking lot. But ABC News just doesn't find that interesting. Neither does CBS or NBC or Fox or CNN.
That is my vision, and it's going to be a kind of more difficult one. But I don't see any other option. And I do see the populist as kind of serving a certain purpose in the sense of like taking eyes off things that we want to do.
Yeah, I would say that's actually a good idea. Like I know that I know Freemasons, they do, that's kind of like the whole thing. I knew a Freemason once, and it was all about like going to secret, I don't know if it was secret, but like going to like lodges and, you know, private meetings and stuff. And and then they have a lot of power, like I think several presidents were Freemasons. And,
they had a lot of influence and power. Yeah. Not to sound like a complete nerd, but you know, the Sith the Sith Order had to spend 1,000 years before Emperor Palpatine was able to take over and reveal himself. And his greatest secret was hiding his dark side energy around people. Sorry for the nerdery, but you can learn things from these Star Wars movies.
Hiding out. There is much to take from that.
Yeah. As opposed to just losing.
Yes.
And yeah, losing's no fun.
Yeah.
Well, the great unanswered course, but anyway,
and talking of, it just seems like
great unanswered question. Yeah.
It is an unanswered question, and I know I kind of like to speak abstractly and talk in metaphors and so on, but I think sometimes that's the right way to think of it. But there is a flow to what is happening, and you know, like the whole transgender thing. You know, I didn't predict that occurring after, say, roughly 2014, when you know the Supreme Court affirmed gay marriage, and there was just kind of, it just seemed like that whole issue had just been settled. And there weren't many more things on the checklist of the cultural left to accomplish. I never would have imagined that we would be talking about drag queens as like a social issue and hormone therapy and etc. But in retrospect, you can see all of this as just almost an inevitable advancement or outcome of things. Like there is a motion to the world, and it's kind of logically working its way out. And if we just endlessly resist that motion, then in that logic, then it's much like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket or swim against the tide, as it were.
Now imagine if these people have been killed by guns, right? Then this would be capturing national attention.
And sometimes you need to kind of swim with the tide and not resist things that are more powerful than you. Actually, at our first meeting, I told a story, which is...
Okay, we got 46 dead migrants sweltered to death, all right, in San Antonio, and ABC News is focusing on it. Chihuahua mix wins world's ugliest dog honor. Right, this is the live news coverage right now. It's extraordinary.
And it's a little anecdotal story, but it's just a kind of metaphor that I've always remember really distinctly from my childhood. And that is, I was at Camp Longhorn in Texas, and we went on a little field trip to the Inks Lake State Park, which is near camp. And they have some cliffs, and you like jump off cliffs, and it's all good fun. I was in this river area, and I was alone swimming, and I was away from everyone. And I was swimming upstream, and I exhausted myself. And then I realized that I was actually going backwards, and I couldn't get to where where we were, because the stream like ran around a pass. And I was swimming harder and harder, and I just felt like I would exhaust myself and drown doing this. Of course, these camp counselors maybe should be criticized for allowing this to happen. Glad I wouldn't have the anecdote if they saved me. And so I just let myself go. And the stream, the current took me around the bend to a point where I actually could get out. And if I just endlessly swum, I would be dead. And so like we can't reverse the current of world history. It has a logic. And to just try to valiantly but vainly swim upstream, I think is going to just lead to a lot of problems. It's going to lead to death and martyrdom. And sometimes you need to just let yourself go and be taken by the current. And I don't think anything can really fundamentally change to like get a culture on a new course unless it's worked its way through its own internal logic. So it's I guess a bit of a Hegelian response. And I know it kind of sounds like I'm saying, oh, just wait for it to collapse or something. I guess I kind of am saying that. I think it needs to, I don't think there's going to ever be like a Mad Max situation like collapse, but I do think there's going to be a legitimacy crisis at the end of this, that all of these things are going to kind of work themselves out to a point where something new is possible, like there'll be a new opportunity.
Well, I think that, there's actually some encouraging signs. One thing I see, and actually I do live in the Bible Belt, but the moral code of the church is, it's actually, we can see it's nearing an end, in the sense I was talking to phenomenon, well, bad, and it's just a local thing, but I guess today, I think, oh, I already quit church testing, God will actually come, and so God will live through the, like I was talking about my neighbor. It's been a while since I've, but that's interesting.
And I think there is a kind of like secular component, and I don't know if college.
That's right, yeah, interesting. And he, but anyway, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, even, I don't know, it is funny. I mean, in terms of like the evangelicals, I mean, I don't even quite know what to make of them now, because I think there's a lot of countervailing things that are occurring. But the Southern Baptist Convention shrinks every year. I think it's been falling by like 5%